The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon, 3 months after Oliver's third birthday party. I was in my home office reviewing quarterly reports from my investment portfolio when my cell phone lit up with an unknown Charleston number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Mrs. Darwell, this is Damian Cross from Cross Moments Photography. I need you to come to my studio today if possible. It's about the photographs from Oliver's birthday party. My stomach tightened immediately. I dealt with enough people in my 57 years to recognize the sound of someone carrying uncomfortable news. Is there a problem with the photos, Mr. Cross? I thought we'd settled everything at the party. No, ma'am, the photos are perfect. Actually, that's the problem. He paused, and I could hear him take a breath. Mrs. Darwell, I discovered something while editing the high-resolution images for the premium album you ordered. Something that I think you need to see this before anyone else does, especially before your son sees it. The way he said, especially before your son, made my blood run cold. I'd spent 33 years building a financial consulting empire by reading between the lines, by catching the details other people missed, and every instinct I'd honed was now screaming that something was terribly wrong. What exactly did you find, Mr. Cross? I can't explain it over the phone. Please, Mrs. Darwell, can you come to the studio this afternoon? And please, don't mention this to Marcus yet. You need to see it first, and then you can decide what to do with the information. I looked at my Cartier watch. It was 2:30. I can be there by 3:15. Thank you. I'll be waiting. The drive to his studio in downtown Charleston should have taken 20 minutes, but I made it in 14. My mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. Had something happened at the party that I missed? Had someone said something inappropriate that got caught on camera? But why would Damian specifically say I needed to see it before Marcus? Cross Moments Photography occupied a converted warehouse space near the historic district, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Damian met me at the door before I could even knock. He was in his mid-30s, always dressed in black, with perpetually disheveled dark hair and the kind of intense artist eyes that saw too much. He'd done beautiful work at Oliver's party, capturing every moment with genuine artistry. That's why I'd paid him $4,800 for the full package. Mrs. Darwell, thank you for coming so quickly. He looked genuinely distressed, which only made my anxiety worse. Please, come to my editing suite. I followed him through the studio space, past walls covered with family portraits and wedding photos, into a smaller room dominated by 2 large computer monitors. His assistant, a young woman named Imogen, was standing by the door looking uncomfortable. Should I give you 2 privacy? She asked quietly. No, stay, Damian said. You're the one who convinced me this was the right thing to do. He turned to me, gesturing at the chair in front of the monitors. Mrs. Darwell, please sit down. I sat, my designer handbag clutched in my lap, my spine straight. Whatever this was, I would face it with the same composure I'd maintained through every boardroom battle, every skeptical investor, every man who'd tried to diminish me with a condescending smile. Damian pulled up a photo on the left monitor. It was a beautiful shot of Oliver blowing out his birthday candles, Marcus and Celeste on either side of him, all of them laughing. It was the kind of perfect family moment that made my heart ache with love for my grandson and relief that my son had found happiness after losing his father 6 years ago. This is one of my favorite shots from the party, Damian said softly. It's absolutely perfect for the album, but when I started doing the high-resolution editing for the premium prints you ordered, I began to notice something. He pulled up the same image on the right monitor, but this time zoomed in significantly on Oliver's face. I have a very high-end camera system, Mrs. Darwell, 26 megapixels. When you zoom in this far, you can see details that aren't visible to the naked eye in normal viewing. He zoomed in further on Oliver's right eye. Do you see this? I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Then I saw it. Oliver's right eye, which I'd always thought was simply brown like his mother's, had a small wedge of green in the iris. Heterochromia. Partial heterochromia. I never noticed that before, I said slowly. Most people wouldn't in normal circumstances, Damian said. It's subtle, and it's only in one eye, but it's definitely there. Heterochromia is genetic, Mrs. Darwell. It's actually quite rare, occurring in less than 1% of the population. Why are you showing me this? But even as I asked, A sick feeling was building in my stomach. Damien pulled up another photo, this one a candid shot of Marcus holding Oliver, both of them grinning at something off camera. He zoomed in on Marcus's eyes, both solid blue. Then he pulled up a photo of Celeste from the party, both eyes solid brown. Neither of Oliver's parents has heterochromia, Damien said quietly. That's unusual, but it could theoretically happen through recessive genes. But then I noticed something else. He pulled up another close-up, this one of Oliver's profile as he reached for a piece of cake. Damien zoomed in on the area behind Oliver's left ear. There, barely visible beneath his fine blonde hair, was a small birthmark in the distinct shape of a crescent moon. "This birthmark," Damien said, his voice heavy with reluctance, "is it something that runs in your family? In Marcus's father's family?" I stared at that crescent-shaped mark, and suddenly I was back at Oliver's birthday party 3 months ago, watching Celeste's personal trainer help carry equipment in from his car. James something. I remembered noticing him because he was unnecessarily good-looking, the kind of man who knew it and used it. And I remembered seeing his profile as he turned, seeing a crescent-shaped birthmark behind his left ear, visible because he wore his dark hair short. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Mrs. Darwell, I need to be clear that I'm not making any accusations," Damien said quickly. "I'm a photographer, not a geneticist, but I've been doing this work for 12 years, and I've photographed thousands of families. I've learned to notice patterns, inherited features, family resemblances. And when I started seeing these anomalies in Oliver's photos, I felt I had a professional and moral obligation to bring them to someone's attention. To your attention specifically, because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I think you're the kind of person who will know what to do with this information responsibly." "Show me everything," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Every detail you noticed." For the next 40 minutes, Damien walked me through his findings with the meticulous care of someone who'd clearly agonized over this decision. The heterochromia, the birthmark, the facial structure analysis he'd done, comparing bone structure and features between Oliver, Marcus, and Celeste. He even pulled up photos from other events he'd photographed where James, Celeste's trainer, had been present. I remembered him because he came to pick up Mrs. Hartwell once during a maternity shoot I did when she was 8 months pregnant, Damien explained, pulling up an older photo. He waited in the studio lobby, and I noticed the heterochromia then because it's distinctive. When I saw it in Oliver's photos, it triggered the memory. In the photo, James was clearly visible in profile, the crescent birthmark unmistakable behind his left ear. The heterochromia was equally obvious, his left eye brown and his right eye an interesting mix of brown and green. The odds of all these genetic markers randomly appearing in a child when neither parent displays them are astronomically low, Damien said. "Mrs. Darwell, I'm not trying to destroy your family, but if this were my son, I would want to know. I would want the choice to find out the truth." I sat back in the chair, my mind working through everything I'd just seen with the same analytical precision I'd once used to evaluate multi-million-dollar investment opportunities. The evidence was circumstantial, yes, but it was also remarkably compelling. Heterochromia in less than 1% of the population. A distinctive birthmark in the exact same location. And James, a man who'd had regular private contact with Celeste for over 3 years, who displayed both these genetic markers prominently. "Can you send me these photos?" I asked. "The close-ups, specifically?" "I can put them on a USB drive for you right now," Damien said. "Mrs. Darwell, I want to apologize if I've overstepped. Imogen told me I should mind my own business, that this isn't my place. But I kept thinking, what if someone knew something like this about my family and didn't tell me? Wouldn't I want to know?" "You did the right thing," I said firmly. "And I need you to do one more thing for me. Don't deliver the final album to Marcus and Celeste yet. Tell them there's a delay with the printing. Tell them whatever you need to. But I need time to handle this before those photos become public." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Imogen handed me a USB drive with a small, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry you're going through this, Mrs. Darwell." I stood, straightening my jacket, forcing my hands not to shake. "Thank you both. And please, keep this completely confidential. No one can know about this conversation." "You have my word," Damien said solemnly. I walked out of that studio into the late afternoon Charleston heat, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about my son's family, about my grandson, about Celeste, was suddenly cast in a different light. For 3 years, I'd watched Marcus build his life with this woman. I'd paid for their wedding, bought them their house, helped them financially whenever they needed it. I'd held Oliver minutes after he was born, had been there for every milestone, had loved him with every fiber of my being. And now, I was looking at evidence that suggested my grandson might not be my grandson at all. I sat in my Mercedes in the parking lot for 10 minutes, just breathing, just thinking. I'd spent my entire career making difficult decisions based on incomplete information, weighing risks and potential outcomes, choosing the path that would cause the least damage while achieving the necessary result. This was no different, except it was my family, my son, my heart. But if there was even a possibility that Marcus was raising another man's child, that Celeste had deceived him so fundamentally, then he deserved to know. He deserved the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. Because the alternative was letting him continue living a lie, potentially for years, potentially forever. I pulled out my phone and made a call to Gregory Matthews, a private investigator I'd used twice before for corporate due diligence. If I was going to do this, if I was going to potentially destroy my son's world, I needed to be absolutely certain. I needed more than photographs and genetic coincidences. Gregory, it's Kate Darwell. I need your help with a very sensitive personal matter. How quickly can you meet me? I can be at your house in an hour, Kate. Make it 45 minutes. I started the car and headed home, my mind already working through scenarios, through possibilities, through the careful steps I would need to take to uncover the truth without causing unnecessary damage. But even as I planned, even as I strategized, one thought kept echoing through my mind with devastating clarity. What if Oliver wasn't Marcus's son? What if the past 3 years of my son's life had been built on a lie? And what would it do to him when he found out? Tentar novamente for bloco 2. Flashback contexto. 1. 800 palabras to 9 minutos. Block 2. Flashback context. Gregory Matthews arrived at my house exactly 43 minutes later, carrying his leather portfolio and wearing the same serious expression he'd worn when I hired him to investigate a potential business partner who turned out to be running a Ponzi scheme. That investigation had saved me from losing $2 million. Now I was asking him to investigate something infinitely more precious than money. We sat in my study, the room where I'd built my financial empire over 3 decades, surrounded by the awards and recognitions I'd earned, fighting my way through a male-dominated industry. Gregory listened without interrupting as I explained everything Damien had shown me, as I transferred the photos from the USB drive to my laptop and walked him through each detail. I need to know the truth, I said finally, but I need it done discreetly. Marcus cannot find out I'm investigating unless and until I have definitive proof of something. Understood, Gregory said, making notes in his portfolio. I'll need to do background on Celeste Hartwell and this James character. I'll need access to phone records if possible, financial transactions, timeline analysis of their relationship. Kate, I have to ask, are you prepared for what I might find? I thought about that question. Was I prepared to discover that my daughter-in-law had betrayed my son in the most fundamental way possible? Was I prepared to watch Marcus's heart break when he learned the truth? Was I prepared to lose Oliver, the child I'd loved as my own blood? No, I said honestly, but I'd rather face a painful truth than live with a comfortable lie. My son deserves that much. I'll get started immediately. Give me 2 weeks. After Gregory left, I sat alone in my study as the sun set over Charleston, and I let myself remember. I let myself go back to the beginning, to trace the path that had led us to this moment. Marcus met Celeste 5 years ago at an architectural networking event downtown. He was 32 then, still grieving his father's sudden death from a heart attack 2 years earlier, throwing himself into work the way I'd once done to avoid my own pain. I'd worried about him, about his isolation, about the way he seemed to be building walls around himself. So when he called me one evening, his voice lighter than it had been in months, and told me he'd met someone, I was genuinely happy. Her name is Celeste, he'd said. She's a designer, Mom. We talked for 3 hours about spatial concepts and aesthetics. She's incredible. I met her 2 weeks later at a dinner Marcus organized at Peninsula Grill, one of Charleston's finest restaurants. Celeste was 24 then, beautiful in that effortless way young women often are, with long dark hair and expressive brown eyes. She wore a bohemian-style dress that probably cost $40, but somehow looked charming rather than cheap. She was polite, attentive, asked intelligent questions about my career, and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. But I remembered feeling something even then, a whisper of unease I couldn't quite name. The way her eyes would flicker to the prices on the menu before she ordered. The way she mentioned, casually, almost too casually, that she was between apartments and staying with a friend. The way she touched Marcus's arm when she laughed, a gesture that seemed slightly calculated rather than spontaneous. I pushed those feelings aside. I told myself I was being an overprotective mother, that I was looking for flaws because no woman would ever be quite good enough for my son. Marcus was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time since his father died. That should have been enough. 4 months later, Celeste was pregnant. Marcus called me at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, his voice shaking with a mixture of anxiety and something that might have been joy. "Mom, Celeste is pregnant. We just found out tonight. I know it's fast. I know we haven't been together long, but I love her. I want to do this right. I want to marry her and build a family." I remembered sitting in my bedroom, phone pressed to my ear, choosing my words carefully. "Marcus, sweetheart, are you sure? You've only known her 4 months. There's no rush. You can take time to figure this out, to make sure this is what you both want." "Mom, I'm 32 years old. I've spent the last 6 years building my career and hiding from life because losing Dad hurt so much. Maybe this is the universe telling me it's time to stop hiding. Celeste makes me happy. This baby is a blessing, even if the timing isn't perfect." What could I say to that? I wanted to tell him to slow down, to be cautious, to protect himself, but I also wanted him to be happy, to have the family he deserved, to move forward with his life instead of staying frozen in grief. So I supported his decision. I threw them an engagement party that cost $18,000. I paid for their wedding 2 months later, a beautiful ceremony at a historic plantation that cost $97,000 by the time everything was finalized. I remembered standing at that wedding, watching Marcus look at Celeste with such complete adoration, watching her hold her small baby bump with perfectly performed maternal tenderness, and feeling that whisper of unease again. But I smiled and toasted their happiness and told myself I was wrong to doubt. When Oliver was born 7 months later, I was at the hospital within an hour of Marcus calling me. I held that tiny baby in my arms and felt my heart expand in ways I hadn't known were possible. He had wispy blonde hair and scrunched-up features and the smallest hands I'd ever seen. He was perfect. He was my grandson, or so I believed. Over the next 3 years, I integrated myself into their lives in the way wealthy grandmothers often do, through generosity that was both genuine love and perhaps slight overcompensation for the years I'd been an absent mother, building my business instead of being at every school event. I paid the $180,000 down payment on their house in the historic district, a beautiful 3-bedroom with a garden perfect for Oliver to play in. I set up a trust fund for Oliver that would be worth $320,000 by the time he turned 21. I paid off $23,000 in credit card debt Celeste had accumulated, which Marcus never knew about because she begged me not to tell him, claiming it was from before they met, and she was embarrassed. I told myself I was helping. I told myself this was what grandmothers did. But looking back now, I could see the pattern I'd been too close to recognize. Every few months, there would be some financial emergency. Celeste's freelance design work wasn't bringing in enough income. There were unexpected medical bills. The car needed major repairs. Oliver needed special equipment or classes or experiences. And I would write another check, sometimes $5,000, sometimes $15,000, once even $32,000 to cover what Celeste claimed was a tax issue. Marcus knew about some of it. He was grateful, perhaps too grateful, always thanking me for supporting them while he built his architectural practice. But he didn't know about all of it. He didn't know about the private payments to Celeste, the ones she insisted were too embarrassing to share with him. And then there was James. I'd met him twice, The first time was about 18 months ago, when I stopped by their house unannounced and found him in the living room with Celeste, supposedly discussing her training program. They'd both seemed slightly flustered when I walked in, though Celeste quickly explained that James was her personal trainer and had stopped by to drop off meal plans. He'd been polite, friendly, had shaken my hand with a firm grip and complimented my BMW parked in the driveway. I'd noticed the heterochromia then, though I hadn't known what it was called. One eye brown, one eye that interesting brown-green mixture. I'd thought it was distinctive, memorable. I'd also noticed his confidence, the way he moved with easy physical grace, the way he looked at Celeste just a fraction of a second too long. But I'd said nothing. Because what was I going to say? That I didn't like the way her personal trainer looked at her? That I thought there might be something inappropriate in their professional relationship? I had no proof, just intuition, and I'd learned over years of being dismissed in boardrooms that women's intuition was rarely taken seriously without concrete evidence. The second time I met James was at Oliver's birthday party 3 months ago, the party that had brought me to Damien's studio today. James had offered to help set up, carrying chairs and tables with effortless strength while Celeste supervised the decorations. Marcus had been running late from a client meeting, arriving just as guests started showing up. I remembered thinking it was odd that Celeste's personal trainer was so involved in family events, but I'd rationalized it away. Maybe they'd become friends. Maybe he didn't have family of his own in Charleston. I'd seen the crescent birthmark that day when James bent down to help Oliver blow out his candles, his short dark hair revealing the distinctive mark behind his left ear. I'd thought nothing of it then. It was just a birthmark, just a physical characteristic that meant nothing. Except now it potentially meant everything. Sitting in my study that evening, reviewing everything I remembered about Celeste and James and the past 3 years, I felt foolish. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? Or maybe the better question was, had I unconsciously seen it but refused to acknowledge what I was seeing, because the truth was too devastating to face? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hey Mom, wanted to let you know Damien said there's a delay with the photo album. Something about printing issues. Kind of disappointed, but these things happen. Hope you're having a good evening. Love you." I stared at that text for a long moment before responding. "Love you too, sweetheart. Don't worry about the album. I'm sure it will be worth the wait." It wasn't a lie exactly. The album would definitely be worth the wait. The question was whether it would bring joy or destroy everything my son believed about his life. I had 2 weeks while Gregory investigated. 2 weeks to prepare myself for whatever truth he uncovered. 2 weeks to decide how I would handle telling Marcus if the worst was confirmed. 2 weeks to figure out how to protect my son from a betrayal that might already be 3 years too late to prevent. Tentar novamente fr bloco 3, escalada, 3,000 palavras, com 15 minutos. Block 3, escalation. Gregory called me 9 days later, 4 days ahead of schedule. That alone told me he'd found something significant. Investigators don't rush good news. "Kate, I need to meet with you in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes. His office was in a nondescript building near the business district, the kind of place that didn't attract attention. Gregory's assistant showed me into his private conference room, where he had a laptop set up and several manila folders arranged on the table, with the precision of someone delivering bad news in an organized fashion. "I'm not going to cushion this," Gregory said after closing the door. "It's worse than you suspected." He opened the first folder and slid several printed photographs across the table. They showed Celeste and James entering and leaving a boutique hotel on King Street. The timestamps ranged from 3 years and 2 months ago to 8 months ago. The relationship between Celeste Harmon, as she was known before marriage, and James Cross began approximately 9 months before she met your son, Gregory said. They were together for 3 months, then had what appears to be a volatile breakup. 2 months after that breakup, Celeste met Marcus at the networking event. But here's where it gets interesting. He pulled up records on his laptop. I accessed phone records through legal channels. 3 weeks after Celeste started dating Marcus, she resumed contact with James Cross. Text message metadata shows they exchanged over 200 messages in the month before she became pregnant. I couldn't access the content of the messages due to encryption, but I could see the frequency and timing. My hands were shaking. I folded them in my lap, refusing to let Gregory see how much this was affecting me. After Celeste became pregnant, communication decreased significantly, but it never stopped completely. During her pregnancy, they met in person at least 6 times that I can document through credit card records and security camera footage from various establishments. After Oliver was born, the meetings became more frequent again. In the past 3 years, I can confirm at least 23 private meetings between Celeste Hartwell and James Cross that had nothing to do with personal training sessions. Were they intimate? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't prove intimacy definitively without more invasive surveillance, but the pattern strongly suggests an ongoing affair. Hotel visits, lengthy stays at his apartment when Marcus was traveling for work, careful timing to avoid detection. Gregory paused. Kate, there's more. I did financial analysis on both Celeste and James. Celeste has been receiving regular payments from James, usually $500 to $1,000 monthly, for the past 2 years. The payments are labeled as personal training fees, but the amounts don't match standard rates, and the frequency is inconsistent with actual training sessions. He's been paying her, I said slowly. Why would he be paying her? That's where it gets complicated. I also found that Celeste has been making regular payments into a savings account that Marcus doesn't appear to have access to. She's accumulated approximately $47,000 in that account over the past 3 years. The deposit pattern suggests she's been siphoning money from the household account Marcus maintains, from the financial gifts you've provided, and from James's payments. I felt sick. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic financial manipulation. There's one more thing, Gregory said quietly. I managed to recover some deleted social media messages from an account Celeste maintained under a pseudonym. The messages between her and James from 2 months ago include discussion about the plan and waiting it out for another 2 years. I couldn't retrieve the full context, but there were references to divorce law and asset division. They're planning to leave Marcus, I said. It wasn't a question. It appears that way. If Celeste stays married to Marcus for 5 years total, she would be entitled to significant spousal support under South Carolina law, especially given the lifestyle you've helped establish for them. With Marcus's growing architecture practice and your financial contributions, she could walk away with a substantial settlement. Gregory closed the laptop and looked at me with genuine sympathy. Kate, I need to tell you something as both your investigator and your friend. You need genetic testing. Everything I've found suggests deception and manipulation, but the question of Oliver's paternity is biological, not investigative. The circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, but Marcus will need definitive proof. Can we do that without Celeste knowing? Not legally, not for court purposes. But if you can obtain DNA samples, there are private labs that can give you preliminary results. However, those results won't be admissible in legal proceedings. For that, you'd need formal paternity testing with all parties' consent or a court order. I sat with that information, feeling the weight of what came next. What would you do, Gregory, if this was your son? He thought for a moment. I'd get the preliminary DNA test first, confirm what we already suspect. Then I'd confront the wife directly, give her a chance to confess before taking it to your son. Sometimes when people know they're caught, they'll admit everything to try to control the narrative. But Kate, you need to be prepared for her to lie, to manipulate, to try to turn Marcus against you. Women like Celeste are survivors. She'll fight to protect what she's built. I left Gregory's office with copies of everything he'd compiled. $15,000 worth of investigation, reduced to manila folders and USB drives that contained the evidence to destroy my son's marriage. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I used the emergency key Marcus had given me and let myself into his house while I knew they were all at a children's museum event. I felt like a criminal, creeping through my son's home. But I kept thinking about those hotel photos, about the secret bank account, about the plan. I found what I needed in Oliver's bathroom, a hairbrush with several strands of his fine blonde hair still attached. I placed them carefully in a sealed plastic bag, the way Gregory had instructed. Then I went to the master bedroom and found one of Marcus's combs in his bathroom drawer. More hair, carefully preserved. Celeste's hair was harder. I finally found strands on a decorative pillow in their bedroom, long dark hairs that could only be hers. into another bag. I was walking down the stairs, bag secured in my purse, when I heard the front door open. My heart stopped. They weren't supposed to be home for another hour. "Mom, is that you?" Marcus's voice. I forced myself to breathe normally, to smile, to become the grandmother who'd simply stopped by, not the detective gathering DNA evidence. "Sweetheart, yes, I'm sorry. I should have called first. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop off those books I told Oliver about last week." I held up a bag I'd grabbed from my car, thank God, that actually contained children's books I'd purchased days ago. Marcus came into the foyer, Oliver in his arms, Celeste trailing behind, looking at her phone. "No problem, Mom. We left early because Oliver got tired. These museum trips always wipe him out." Oliver reached for me, and I took him in my arms, breathing in his little boy smell of apple juice and sunshine. My grandson. Or was he? I kissed his forehead and tried not to think about the hair samples in my purse. "How are you, Celeste?" I asked, keeping my voice pleasant. She looked up from her phone with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, exhausted. Oliver's 3-year-old energy is no joke." She glanced at Marcus. "Babe, I'm going to lie down for a bit. That museum was so loud." I watched her climb the stairs, wondering how I'd ever thought she was just young and unsure of herself. Now I could see the calculation in every movement, the performance of the overwhelmed mother seeking sympathy and escape. "She okay?" I asked Marcus quietly after she disappeared. "Yeah, she's just tired a lot lately. I keep telling her she should ease up on the personal training sessions with James, but she says exercise helps her mental health." Marcus set Oliver down to play with his toys. "Actually, Mom, I'm glad you stopped by. I wanted to talk to you about something." My heart rate spiked. Did he know? Had he discovered something? "I'm thinking about expanding the practice," Marcus continued, oblivious to my panic. "There's an opportunity to take on 2 junior architects and bid on some larger commercial projects. It would mean significant growth, but it would also mean substantial upfront investment. I was wondering if you might consider being a partner investor. I'd pay you back with interest, of course, and how much are we talking about? Probably around $200,000 to do it right. New office space, salaries, equipment, marketing. I have about $40,000 saved, but I'd need to borrow the rest. $200,000. More money tied into Marcus's life with Celeste. More financial entanglement that would make everything messier when the truth came out. If the truth came out, the way I suspected it would. "Let me think about it, sweetheart. It's a significant amount, and I want to review your business plan carefully. Can you send me the details?" "Of course. Thanks, Mom. I know I can always count on you." That phrase stabbed at me. He could count on me. But could he count on his wife? Could he count on the family he thought he'd built? I left their house 20 minutes later, the DNA samples secure in my purse. Marcus's trusting smile burned into my memory. I drove straight to the private lab Gregory had recommended, paid $800 for expedited processing, and was told results would be available in 5 to 7 business days. Those 7 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of my daily routine, managing my investments, attending my book club, having lunch with friends. But underneath it all, I was waiting, dreading, preparing myself for confirmation of what I already knew in my gut. The results came back on a Tuesday morning via encrypted email. I sat in my study with a cup of coffee I couldn't drink and opened the attachment. Probability of paternity between Marcus Hartwell and Oliver Hartwell. 0.0%. I stared at those numbers until they blurred. 0. Not unlikely, not improbable. Impossible. Marcus was not Oliver's biological father. The report continued with technical details about genetic markers and allele patterns. But I didn't need to read further. The fundamental truth was there in black and white. My son had been raising another man's child for 3 years, believing Oliver was his own, building his entire life around a lie. I closed my laptop and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to cry. 10 minutes to grieve for Marcus, for the innocence he was about to lose, for the family that was about to shatter. Then I dried my eyes, fixed my makeup, and started planning. I needed more. The DNA test was preliminary, not court admissible. I needed Celeste's confession or more concrete evidence of the affair. I needed something that would make the truth undeniable, that would protect Marcus from Celeste's inevitable attempts to manipulate the situation. I called Gregory. I need audio surveillance on Celeste. Is that legal? Not without consent in South Carolina. It's a one-party consent state, meaning at least one person in the conversation must consent to recording. You can't just plant bugs in someone's home. What if I recorded a conversation I was personally having with her? That would be legal. But Kate, are you sure you want to confront her directly? That could backfire spectacularly. I'm not going to confront her yet. I'm going to give her an opportunity to confess. Sometimes guilt works where confrontation doesn't. I spent 2 days planning exactly what I would say, how I would approach it. Then I invited Celeste to lunch, just the two of us, at a quiet restaurant downtown. I wore a wire, a small digital recorder that Gregory had provided, tucked into my jacket pocket. Celeste arrived 15 minutes late, looking effortlessly casual in yoga pants and an expensive athleisure top I suspected I'd indirectly paid for. She ordered a salad and a glass of wine, seemingly relaxed and unconcerned. Thanks for inviting me to lunch, Kate. We don't do this often enough, just the two of us. I wanted to talk to you about something important, I said, keeping my voice gentle but serious. About your future with Marcus. She tilted her head, curiosity mixed with what might have been wariness. Okay? You've been married 3 years now. You have a beautiful son together. Marcus loves you deeply. I paused, watching her face. I need to know, Celeste. Is this the life you really want? Or are you staying for other reasons? I don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking if you're happy, if you love my son, if this marriage is built on the foundation it should be built on. I leaned forward slightly. Because if it's not, if there are things Marcus doesn't know, now would be the time to be honest, before more time passes, before more damage is done. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face, fear, guilt, but it was gone almost instantly, replaced by a look of wounded confusion. Kate, I love Marcus. Of course I do. Why would you even ask me that? I'm asking because I care about my son's happiness, and because I've been alive long enough to recognize when something doesn't feel right. I held her gaze. If there's anything you need to tell me, anything at all, I promise I'll help you handle it in the best way possible. But secrets have a way of coming out eventually, and it's always better to control how that happens. Celeste's eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. I don't have any secrets, Kate. And honestly, I'm a little hurt that you would suggest I do. Have I not been a good wife to Marcus, a good mother to Oliver? What exactly are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm offering you a chance to be honest. I am being honest. She set down her fork with deliberate precision. You know, Kate, I've tried really hard to have a good relationship with you. I've accepted your generosity gracefully. I've included you in every part of our lives. I've never complained about your involvement, even when you're a little overbearing. But this? Inviting me to lunch to interrogate me about my marriage? That crosses a line. She was good. I had to give her that. The wounded dignity, the careful recitation of everything she'd tolerated, the subtle accusation that I was the problem. If I hadn't seen Gregory's evidence, if I didn't have DNA results confirming my suspicions, I might have actually felt guilty. You're right, I said calmly. I apologize if I overstepped. I just want Marcus to be happy. So do I. Celeste picked up her wine glass. He is happy, Kate. We're happy. I know we're not the perfect family you might have wanted for him, but we're doing our best. Maybe you could try to trust that. The lunch ended cordially enough, but I could feel the shift. Celeste knew I suspected something, even if she didn't know how much. She would be on guard now, would probably warn James, would circle the wagons to protect herself. I'd given her a chance to confess. She'd chosen to lie. Now I needed to take a different approach. That evening, I called Gregory again. She's not going to confess. We need to force the issue. What about surveillance on James Cross? Can we establish current contact between them? I can try. But Kate, this is getting expensive and potentially legally complicated. I don't care about expensive. I care about protecting my son. Do whatever you need to do. 3 days later, Gregory called with exactly what I needed. Kate, remember how I mentioned that Damien Cross, the photographer, shares a last name with James? I did some digging. They're cousins. And Damien has some very interesting information about James that he's willing to share with you. Tentar novamente FR Bloco 4. Ponto de virada. 1200 palavras. Wine 6 minutos. Block 4. Turning point. I met Damien Cross at his studio again, but this time his cousin James was the subject of our conversation, not my grandson's photographs. Damien looked even more uncomfortable than he had during our first meeting, and his assistant Imogen was conspicuously absent. Mrs. Darwell, I need to start by saying I love my cousin, but I don't approve of what he's doing. I haven't approved for a long time. Damien sat across from me in his editing suite, hands clasped together. When your investigator contacted me, I realized I had information that could help you protect your son. Tell me everything, I said. James has been involved with Celeste for almost 4 years. I know because he told me about her back when they first got together, before she even met your son. He was crazy about her, talked about her constantly. Then they broke up, and he was devastated. But a few months later he told me she'd contacted him again, said she was seeing someone else but wanted to keep their relationship going in secret. Damien pulled out his phone and scrolled through old messages. I told him it was wrong, that he needed to let her go and move on. But James has always been impulsive about women. He's a good guy in a lot of ways, but he makes terrible decisions when he's emotionally involved. He showed me a text message from 3 years ago. This is from right around the time Celeste would have gotten pregnant. The message read, "She says she loves me, but needs financial security first. Says the other guy can provide what I can't. I hate this, but I'll wait for her." "The other guy is Marcus," I said flatly. "Yeah." I didn't know who Marcus was at the time, didn't know he was your son or anything about your family. But over the past 3 years, James has told me things. About how Celeste is playing a long game, how they're waiting until she can divorce with maximum financial benefit. He talks about Oliver like he's his son, Mrs. Darwell. He's absolutely convinced that child is his. My hands tightened on my purse. Did he ever suggest getting a paternity test? He wanted to, but Celeste refused. She said it was too risky, that Marcus might find out, that they needed to wait until the timing was right. She's been stringing him along with promises of being together eventually while she secures her financial position through your son. Does James have any proof of paternity? Any admission from Celeste? Damien hesitated, then pulled up another file on his phone. This is from Oliver's birthday party. Remember how I told you I had ambient audio recordings? Well, James was there helping set up, and at one point he and Celeste were in your son's backyard garden alone. They didn't know the microphone system extended that far. He played the recording. It was the same one he'd mentioned to Gregory, but this time I heard it in full context. Celeste's voice was unmistakable. "He's beautiful, isn't he? Oliver. He has your eyes, you know, the heterochromia. Sometimes I worry Marcus will notice, but he never looks that closely." James's voice responded, deeper, more emotional. "I should be the one raising him, Celeste. I'm his father. This whole thing is killing me." "I know, baby, I know. Just 2 more years. We've talked about this. 2 more years and I can file for divorce with enough accumulated assets to make it worth it. Marcus's practice is growing. His mother keeps giving us money. We just need to be patient. What if he finds out before then? What if someone figures it out? No one will. Marcus trusts me completely. And Kate, she suspects I'm not good enough for her precious son, but she doesn't actually know anything. She's just a controlling old woman who needs to mind her own business." I felt my face flush with anger, but I kept listening. "Besides," Celeste continued, "even if someone did suspect, what would they do? Accuse me based on what? Marcus would never believe I'd cheat on him. He's too idealistic, too convinced we have this perfect little family. He'll believe whatever I tell him until I'm ready for him not to." The recording ended. I sat in silence for a long moment, processing the casual cruelty in Celeste's voice, the calculated manipulation, the complete lack of remorse. "That's not all," Damien said quietly. He pulled up another audio file. "This is from 2 weeks ago. James stopped by my studio upset, and he didn't realize I had recording equipment running from an earlier client session. He was on the phone with Celeste, and I caught one side of the conversation. He played it. James's voice, frustrated and angry. "I'm tired of waiting, Celeste. I want to be with my son. I want us to be a real family. No, I don't care about the money. You're the one who cares about the money. Fine. Yes, I know the plan. Wait until you hit 5 years of marriage, maximize the settlement. But what if I just told Marcus the truth? What if I went to him right now and... You'd do what? You'd deny everything? Make me look like a stalker? Jesus, Celeste, sometimes I don't even know who you are anymore. Damien stopped the recording. Mrs. Darwell, I'm giving you these recordings because I think you deserve to know what you're dealing with. But I need to be honest. I don't know if they're admissible in court. I'm not even sure if it was legal for me to keep them given privacy laws. You'd need to talk to a lawyer. It doesn't matter, I said, my mind working through the implications. What matters is that this is proof, irrefutable proof of her intent, her planning, her admission that Oliver is James's son. Even if it can't be used in court, I can use it to force the truth. I looked at Damien directly. Why are you helping me? James is your cousin. This will destroy his relationship with Celeste, possibly get him in legal trouble. Because what they're doing is wrong, Damien said simply. Your son doesn't deserve this. That little boy deserves to know who his real father is. And honestly, I think James is being manipulated too. He's not a bad person. He's just weak when it comes to Celeste. Maybe this will force him to see her for who she really is. I thanked Damien and left with copies of the audio files encrypted on a new USB drive. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just breathing, just preparing myself for what came next. I had everything I needed now. DNA evidence proving Marcus wasn't Oliver's father. Financial records showing systematic deception. Surveillance showing ongoing affair. And now, audio recordings of Celeste and James discussing their plan to defraud my son. It was time to tell Marcus the truth. I called him from my car. Marcus, I need you to come to my house tonight, alone. Don't bring Celeste. Don't tell her you're coming. Please, sweetheart, it's important. There was a pause. Mom, you're scaring me. What's going on? I need to show you something. Something about your marriage. Please just trust me and come alone. Another pause, longer this time. I'll be there at 7. I drove home with tears streaming down my face, knowing that in a few hours I was going to break my son's heart with the truth. But I also knew that letting him continue living the lie would break him even more completely in the end. Sometimes love means causing pain to prevent greater suffering. Sometimes being a mother means destroying your child's illusions to save them from something worse. Tonight, I would do what I'd done throughout my career when faced with hard truths and harder choices. I would be strong, I would be clear, and I would help Marcus face the reality that his life was built on lies, even if it destroyed us both in the process. Tentar novamente, fr bloco 5. Climax, 2,500 palabras, 13 minutos. Block 5, climax. Marcus arrived at 7:15, walking into my house with the kind of tense worry that comes from knowing something is wrong, but not yet knowing how wrong. He was still wearing his work clothes, a tailored navy suit that I'd helped him pick out 2 years ago, and his face showed the strain of whatever he'd imagined during the drive over. Mom, what's going on? You sounded really serious on the phone. I gestured to the study. Come sit down, sweetheart. This is going to take some time, and it's not going to be easy to hear. He followed me, and I could see him noticing the manila folders arranged on my desk, the laptop positioned and ready, the box of tissues I'd placed nearby because I knew we'd both need them. His face paled slightly. Is it medical? Are you sick? No, Marcus. I'm fine. This isn't about me. I sat down across from him, taking a moment to memorize his face before I shattered his world. This is about Celeste and Oliver, and things you need to know about your marriage. What things? His voice had an edge now, defensive. Mom, if this is about your suspicions again, if you're going to tell me you think there's something wrong with my wife, Marcus, please, just listen. I'm going to show you evidence, documented proof of things that have been happening, and I need you to look at everything before you make any judgments or decisions. Can you do that for me? He crossed his arms but nodded, his jaw tight. I started with Damien's original discovery, pulling up the high-resolution photographs of Oliver on my laptop. 3 months ago, Damien Cross called me to his studio. He'd noticed something unusual in the birthday photos. I walked Marcus through the heterochromia, the crescent birthmark, the genetic markers that didn't match either him or Celeste. Marcus stared at the images, his face unreadable. Okay, So Oliver has some unusual genetic traits. That doesn't mean anything. Recessive genes, right? Things skip generations. That's what I hoped too, I said quietly. So I hired a private investigator to look into it further. Gregory Matthews. He spent 2 weeks doing background research. I slid the first folder across the desk. This is what he found. Marcus opened the folder slowly, and I watched his expression change as he looked through the surveillance photos. Celeste and James entering hotels, time-stamped images spanning years, phone record summaries showing hundreds of communications, financial transactions that made no sense for a simple trainer-client relationship. This doesn't prove anything, Marcus said, but his voice was shaking now. Maybe they're friends. Maybe she needed someone to talk to. Look at the dates, Marcus. Look at how long this has been going on. Look at when it started. He flipped through pages, and I saw the moment it registered. This is from before we even met. And then, he stopped, his finger on a hotel receipt dated 2 months into their relationship. We were together then. She told me she was at a design conference in Colombia that weekend. There's more. I opened the second folder. Financial analysis. Celeste has been receiving regular payments from James for 2 years. She's been putting money into a secret savings account, nearly $50,000 that you don't know about, accumulated from various sources including money I gave you both. Marcus's hands were trembling as he looked through the bank statements. Why would she? I don't understand. Why would she be hiding money? Because she's planning to leave you, sweetheart. She's been planning it for a while now. Just not until she maximizes her financial settlement. I pulled up Gregory's report on the recovered messages. There are references to the plan and waiting for the 5-year mark of marriage. Under South Carolina law, that would entitle her to significant spousal support. Stop! Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This is insane. You're telling me my wife has been having an affair for years, stealing money, planning to divorce me? That's not the woman I know. Celeste wouldn't do this. Marcus, I need to show you something else. Something that proves this isn't speculation or misunderstanding. I pulled out the DNA results, my hand shaking as I held them. I had genetic testing done. Preliminary testing, but accurate. Marcus, Oliver isn't your biological son. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus turned from the window, his face completely white. What did you just say? The probability of you being Oliver's father is 0%. Marcus, I'm so sorry, but Oliver is James Cross's biological child. The genetic markers prove it. The heterochromia, the birthmark, everything Damien noticed in the photographs. It all points to James being the biological father. Marcus moved toward me like he was walking through water, taking the paper from my hands with mechanical precision. He read it once, twice, 3 times. I watched his eyes scan the numbers, watched the reality settle over him like a physical weight. No, his voice was barely a whisper. No, this can't be right. Oliver is my son. I was there when he was born. I held him. I've raised him for 3 years. He calls me Daddy. He's my son. I know, sweetheart. I know you love him. But biology. Marcus's voice cracked. You're talking about biology? I don't care about biology. He's my son. He crumpled the paper in his fist, tears streaming down his face. How could you do this? How could you investigate my wife, get DNA tests on my child without telling me? What gave you the right? Marcus, I was trying to protect you. I needed to be sure before you destroyed my entire life. He was shouting now, years of controlled emotions finally breaking. Before you proved that everything I've built, everything I believed in, was a lie? Did you think you were helping? Did you think this was kindness? I thought you deserved the truth. I deserved a choice. He threw the crumpled paper across the room. I deserved to live my life without you deciding what I needed to know. Maybe I would have been happy not knowing. Maybe ignorance was better than this. No, it wasn't. I stood, facing him with all the strength I had left. Marcus, listen to me. Celeste and James were planning to leave you anyway. In 2 years, she would have filed for divorce and taken everything she could get. You would have lost Oliver then, lost your money, lost everything, and you still would have learned the truth. At least now you have the power to make decisions, to protect yourself. Protect myself? Mom, I don't want to protect myself. I want my family. I want my son. He sank into the chair, his head in his hands. How am I supposed to look at him now? How am I supposed to go home and see Oliver and know that he's not mine? He is yours in every way that matters. You're the one who's raised him, who's loved him. But Celeste took away your right to make that choice consciously. She lied to you, used you, manipulated you for years. That's not love, Marcus. That's betrayal. I need proof, he said suddenly, looking up. Real proof. Not just DNA from hair you stole from my house. I need to hear it from her. I need her to tell me the truth. I have that too. I pulled up the audio files on my laptop. These are recordings from Oliver's birthday party. Damien's equipment captured Celeste and James talking in your backyard. And there's another recording from 2 weeks ago. Marcus, I'm warning you, this is going to hurt. Are you sure you want to hear it? He nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. I played the first recording. Celeste's voice filled my study, casual and cold as she discussed Oliver's heterochromia, as she called James his father, as she laid out her plan to wait 2 more years before divorcing. I watched my son's face as he listened to his wife dismissing him as too idealistic, too trusting, too easy to fool. When it finished, Marcus sat in absolute silence for almost a minute. Then he said very quietly, "Play the other one." I played James's side of the phone conversation, his frustration with waiting, Celeste's apparent threats to deny everything if he exposed the truth. When it ended, Marcus stood and walked to the window again, staring out at the darkening Charleston evening. "How long have you known?" he asked finally. "I got the DNA results 6 days ago, but I suspected something was wrong from the moment Damien called me about the photographs. I've been gathering evidence because I knew you'd need it. I knew you wouldn't believe it otherwise." "You were right. I wouldn't have believed it." He turned back to me, and the look in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. A complete devastation mixed with cold anger. I need to confront her. Tonight. I need to hear her admit it to my face. "Marcus, maybe you should wait. Get a lawyer first. Make sure you're protected legally before—" "No, I'm not waiting another second. I'm going home right now, and I'm going to ask her if any of this is true. And if she lies to me, if she looks me in the eye and lies, I'm going to play these recordings and watch her face when she realizes she's caught. Then I'm coming with you." "Mom, no." "Yes, you're not doing this alone. She's going to try to manipulate you, to make excuses, to turn this around on you somehow. I'm coming with you, and we're doing this together." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Bring everything, all the evidence. I want her to see it all." We drove to his house in separate cars, and I watched Marcus sit in his driveway for 5 full minutes before getting out. I parked behind him and gathered the folders, the laptop, the USB drives with recordings. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to be calm. Marcus needed me to be strong now. The house was lit up, warm and welcoming, the picture of domestic happiness. Through the window, I could see Celeste on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up in surprise when Marcus opened the door with me behind him. "Marcus? Kate? I didn't know you were coming over." She stood, her expression shifting to concern. "Is everything okay?" "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice flat. "About our marriage, about Oliver, about James Cross." I watched the color drain from Celeste's face. Just for a second, her mask slipped, and I saw pure panic. Then she recovered, forcing confusion into her expression. "James, my trainer? What about him? Marcus, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Don't." Marcus's voice was sharp. "Don't do that. Don't pretend. Don't lie anymore." He set the folders on the coffee table. "I know about the affair. I know about the plan. I know Oliver isn't my biological son." Celeste looked from Marcus to me, and I saw her calculating, trying to figure out how much we actually knew versus what we were bluffing about. "Marcus, I don't know what your mother has been telling you, but—" "My mother didn't tell me anything except the truth. The truth that you've been lying about for 3 years." He opened the laptop and pulled up the photographs. "Oliver has genetic markers that neither of us have. Markers that James Cross has. My mother had DNA testing done. There's 0 probability that I'm Oliver's biological father. That's not. DNA tests can be wrong. You can't trust those." Marcus played the first audio recording. Celeste's own voice filled the room, discussing Oliver's heterochromia, calling James his father, outlining her plan to wait for maximum financial benefit before divorcing. I watched Celeste's face cycle through emotions: shock, fear, anger, and finally something like resignation. When the recording ended, she sank back onto the couch. "How did you get that?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" Marcus said. "Is it true? Is any of it true?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at him, and I saw tears in her eyes, real tears, but I couldn't tell if they were from remorse or self-pity. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," she said softly. "James and I, we were together before I met you. We were in love, but he couldn't give me stability. He was a personal trainer living paycheck to paycheck. I wanted more than that. I deserved more than that. So you used me," Marcus said flatly. "No, I mean, yes. At first, maybe I saw you as someone who could provide security. But I did love you, Marcus. I still do in my way. You're a good man. You've been a wonderful father to Oliver." "A father to another man's child," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "A child you let me believe was mine. Do you have any idea what that feels like? Do you even care?" "Of course I care. I never wanted to hurt you. I got pregnant with James's baby, and I panicked. We'd just started dating, and you were so good to me, so trusting. It seemed easier to let you believe Oliver was yours, and then you were so happy about the pregnancy, so excited to be a father. How could I take that away from you?" "By telling me the truth," Marcus shouted. "By giving me the choice. But you didn't, did you? Because you wanted my money, my mother's money, the lifestyle we could provide. You wanted it all, and you didn't care what it cost me." Celeste stood, reaching for him. "Marcus, please. I made mistakes, I know I did. But we can work through this. We can go to therapy, we can—" "Work through this?" Marcus stepped back from her touch. "You've been planning to divorce me. You've been stealing money, having an ongoing affair, raising James's child while taking my mother's financial support. There's nothing to work through, Celeste. This marriage is over." "You can't do this," Celeste said, and now her voice had an edge. "You can't just throw me out. I have rights. Oliver has rights. Oliver has a right to know his real father," I said, speaking for the first time. "And you have a right to nothing. We have evidence of fraud, of your affair, of your plan to defraud Marcus financially. You're going to agree to a divorce on our terms, or we're going to make sure every bit of this becomes public record in court." Celeste turned to me, and the mask was completely gone now. "You did this. You couldn't stand that your precious son chose me. You've been trying to break us up from the beginning. I've been trying to protect my son from a woman who saw him as a meal ticket. And now he finally sees you for who you really are. Get out," Marcus said quietly. "Pack a bag and get out of my house. Tonight." "This is my house too," Celeste said. "You can't just kick me out." "Actually, he can," I said. "The house is in Marcus's name. The down payment I provided was a gift to him, not you. You have no legal claim to this property. So pack your things or I'll call the police and show them evidence of fraud." Celeste looked between us, seeming to realize she'd lost. "What about Oliver? Are you going to tell him his daddy doesn't want him anymore?" "Don't you dare," Marcus said, his voice dangerous. "Don't you dare suggest I don't want him. I love Oliver. I'll always love him. But he deserves to know who his biological father is, and James deserves to take responsibility for his child. You're going to establish paternity legally, and then we're going to figure out custody arrangements that actually serve Oliver's best interests. And if I refuse, then we take all of this to court, and you lose everything. Choose wisely, Celeste." She stared at Marcus for a long moment, then turned and walked upstairs without another word. We heard her moving around in the bedroom, drawers opening and closing, the sounds of someone's life being hastily packed into suitcases. Marcus sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I sat beside him and put my arm around his shoulders, feeling him shake with silent sobs. "What do I tell Oliver?" he whispered. "How do I explain this to a 3-year-old? "You tell him that you love him," I said softly. "You tell him that families are complicated sometimes, but love is real. And you let him be a child while the adults figure out the rest." Celeste came downstairs 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases and her designer handbag. She paused at the door, looking back at Marcus. "I really did love you," she said. "I know you don't believe that now, but it was true. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I ruined it. I'm sorry, Marcus, for whatever that's worth." Then she was gone, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Marcus and I sat in that house for hours, not really talking, just sitting together in the ruins of his shattered life. And I held my son the way I'd held him when he was small, offering the only comfort I could, my presence, my love, and the promise that somehow, eventually, we would find a way through this devastation to something resembling peace. Tentar novamente for bloco 6. Resolução. 1500 palavras, 107 minutos. Block 6. Resolution. The formal paternity test was conducted 1 week later at a private medical facility. Marcus insisted on being present, wanted to see the process himself, even though we all knew what the results would confirm. Celeste came with her lawyer, a sharp woman in an expensive suit who'd clearly been briefed to minimize her client's legal exposure. James showed up looking nervous and defiant in equal measure, his heterochromia more noticeable than I'd remembered, a constant visual reminder of the truth we'd all been avoiding. The results took 72 hours. Probability of paternity between Marcus Hartwell and Oliver Hartwell, 0.00%. Probability of paternity between James Cross and Oliver Hartwell, 99.97%. Marcus read those numbers in the lawyer's office and said nothing. He'd already done his grieving in private, had spent the previous week moving between my house and his now empty home, like a ghost. He'd taken leave from his architecture firm, telling his partners only that there was a family emergency. Oliver had stayed with Celeste at a furnished apartment she'd rented with money from her secret account, and Marcus had seen him twice for supervised visits that left my son devastated each time. I don't know how to be around him anymore, Marcus had told me after the second visit. I look at him, and I see James's eyes, James's birthmark. But then he calls me Daddy, and wants me to play trucks with him, and my heart breaks all over again because I love him so much and he's not mine. He is yours, I'd said. Not biologically, but in every other way that matters. You're the only father he's known. But for how long? Once James has legal custody? Once Celeste decides I'm not useful anymore? How long before they phase me out completely? I hadn't had an answer for that. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Marcus's lawyer presented all our evidence, the surveillance, the recordings, the financial fraud. Celeste's lawyer tried to negotiate for spousal support and shared custody, but the recordings of Celeste explicitly discussing her plan to defraud Marcus killed any sympathy she might have garnered. In the end, she agreed to a clean break. No spousal support, no claim to the house or Marcus's business. The trust fund I'd established for Oliver would remain intact, managed by me until he turned 21, but Celeste would have no access to it. The custody arrangement was more complicated. James, confronted with legal paternity and financial responsibility, suddenly seemed less enthusiastic about fatherhood. He wanted visitation rights, but balked at the idea of primary custody. Celeste, realizing that being a single mother without Marcus's financial support would be significantly harder than she'd planned, seemed equally overwhelmed. Marcus, in a moment that showed more strength than I'd thought possible given his pain, made an offer. He would formally renounce legal paternity and any claim to custody, but he wanted to remain in Oliver's life as a family friend if James and Celeste agreed. He wouldn't fight for custody rights he legally didn't have, but he asked for the chance to still be present for the child he'd raised as his son. James, perhaps feeling guilty, or perhaps just recognizing that having another adult willing to help with childcare was beneficial, agreed. The arrangement was unusual, but the lawyers managed to draft an agreement that satisfied everyone legally, if not emotionally. 6 months passed. Marcus sold the house on the historic street, unable to live with the memories. He bought a modern condo downtown and threw himself back into work with an intensity that worried me. His architecture firm landed the $200,000 contract he'd wanted, and he poured every hour into the project. He saw Oliver every other Saturday, taking him to parks and museums, being Uncle Marcus instead of Daddy now, though Oliver at 3.5 didn't fully understand the distinction. I watched my son rebuild his life piece by careful piece. He started therapy, something he'd always resisted before, and I could see it helping him process the betrayal. He began dating again, cautiously, choosing women who were established in their own careers and made it clear they weren't looking for someone to take care of them financially. Celeste and James's relationship predictably fell apart within 3 months. Without the fantasy of a secret romance and the financial cushion of Marcus's support, they discovered they didn't actually like each other very much. James moved out of Celeste's apartment, established a visitation schedule for Oliver, and paid child support with obvious resentment. Celeste struggled financially, her freelance design work not bringing in nearly enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. She reached out to Marcus twice, trying to apologize, trying to explain, perhaps hoping for reconciliation or at least financial help. He blocked her number after the second attempt. I continued managing Oliver's trust fund, watching it grow with careful investments. That money would be there for him when he turned 21, regardless of what happened with his parents. It was my way of ensuring that the innocent child in this situation would have something solid to build on, something that couldn't be taken away or manipulated. On a warm Charleston afternoon 1 year after the paternity test, Marcus stopped by my house for our weekly dinner. He looked better than he had in months, some of the light returning to his eyes, some of the weight lifting from his shoulders. "I saw Oliver yesterday," he said as we sat on my veranda with glasses of sweet tea. "He's doing okay. He talks about James as daddy now, seems to be adjusting. He asked about you, asked when he could see Grandma Kate again." "What did you tell him?" "I told him soon. I thought maybe you could come with me next time I take him out, if you want to." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'd like that very much. Mom, I need to say something." Marcus set down his glass and looked at me directly. "I was so angry with you when you first told me the truth. I blamed you for destroying my life, but you didn't destroy it. Celeste did. You just prevented her from destroying it even more completely. If you hadn't investigated, if you hadn't pushed for the truth, I'd probably be sitting here 2 years from now facing a divorce where she took half of everything I'd built and I still would have lost Oliver. At least this way, I had some control, some choice. You don't have to thank me for breaking your heart, sweetheart. I'm not thanking you for breaking my heart. I'm thanking you for loving me enough to do something incredibly difficult because it was right. You could have ignored what Damien told you. You could have let me stay in ignorant happiness. But you didn't, because you're not built that way. You face hard truths and make hard choices, and you taught me to do the same." I reached over and took his hand. "You're stronger than you know, Marcus. You've handled this with more grace than I ever could have at your age. I learned from the best." He smiled, and it was genuine. "You built an empire fighting people who underestimated you. I'm rebuilding a life after being betrayed by someone I trusted. We're both survivors, Mom. We both know how to take a hit and keep going." We sat together watching the sun set over Charleston, the city where I'd built my success and where my son was rebuilding his life. The wounds were still raw, would be for a long time, but they were healing. We were healing. I thought about Celeste sometimes, wondered if she regretted her choices or if she'd simply moved on to the next opportunity, the next man who might provide the security she craved. I thought about James, raising the son he'd claimed to want but seemed unprepared for. I thought about Oliver, an innocent child caught in the consequences of adult deception, and I hoped that the trust fund I'd secured for him would give him options his mother never had, choices that might break the cycle. But mostly I thought about Marcus, about the man he was becoming after surviving betrayal. He was harder now, more cautious, but also more authentic. He'd learned that love without truth was just another form of lie, that trust had to be earned, not assumed, that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you let closest. He'd learned what I'd known for decades, what building a business in a world designed to discount me had taught me long ago, that your greatest strength isn't avoiding pain, it's surviving it. It's looking at devastating truth and choosing to move forward anyway. It's protecting the people you love, even when that protection costs you their temporary happiness. The photographs from Oliver's 3rd birthday party still existed somewhere, stored on Damien's servers and my computer. Evidence of a moment when we'd all gathered to celebrate a child's joy, unaware that those images would reveal truths that would destroy a family. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if Damien had never noticed the heterochromia, never seen that crescent birthmark, never called me to his studio. Would ignorance have been kinder? But then I thought about Marcus 2 years from now, facing Celeste's planned betrayal with no preparation, no protection, no control. I thought about him losing not just Oliver, but his business, his home, his faith in his own judgment. And I knew that however much the truth had hurt, it had hurt less than the lie would have eventually. Sometimes love means making impossible choices. Sometimes being a mother means destroying your child's world to save them from something worse. Sometimes the truth is the most painful gift you can give someone, and the most necessary. A year after the worst day of my son's life, we sat together on my veranda, two survivors who'd learned that truth, however brutal, was always better than the prettiest lie. And while neither of us would have chosen this path, we'd walked it together and emerged stronger. That, in the end, was what mattered most. Not the betrayal we'd uncovered, but the love that had survived it. Not the family we'd lost, but the strength we'd found. Not the comfortable illusion we'd destroyed, but the hard-won truth we'd built our future on. Marcus squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, and we watched the Charleston sun disappear below the horizon, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring together.